Idiomatic expressions for your IELTS speaking test. This video will help you to prepare idiomatic expressions for your speaking test. Why do we need idiomatic expressions? Well, they're extremely important to get to band 7 and above for vocabulary, also known as lexical resource. You can see where I've underlined uses some less common and idiomatic vocabulary. So it's extremely important to have some idiomatic expressions when you have your IELTS speaking test. How many do we need? I suggest you prepare about 20 flexible idiomatic expressions. Practice using them by looking at questions and thinking of an idiomatic expression you can use to answer it. Try and use at least 5 in your test. Avoid stale ones. These are also called cliches. A couple of examples of cliche or overused idiomatic expressions. A cliche in general is an overused phrase, and some of these idiomatic expressions are overused. Here's a couple of examples. Raining cats and dogs, not really going to impress the examiner. Every coin has two sides. So these two are ones that you don't really want to be using. Now I'm going to give you some examples of some idiomatic expressions you can use to impress the examiner and to increase your score for vocabulary to 7 and beyond. On the go means busy. I've been on the go moving house all day and I'm really tired. Just the ticket means just what you need. This truck is just the ticket for moving our boxes. Upmarket is a way to describe something that's expensive and appeals to the rich. She lives in an upmarket neighborhood with lots of expensive houses. Chill out means to relax. My favorite way to chill out is to have a massage. The in thing means something that is fashionable and popular. This rose-colored iPhone is the in thing this year. Big fan of means somebody who really likes something. I'm a big fan of basketball, so I never miss a game. Up to the minute means the most recent. Nowadays, the internet includes up-to-the-minute news stories. Off the top of my head means without thinking. Off the top of my head, I will probably go shopping at the weekend. Run-of-the-mill means something that's average or typical. This is not your run-of-the-mill computer. It has many advanced functions. Something that's mouth-watering is delicious. It makes our mouth water. The turkey leg was so mouth-watering, I ate the whole thing. An eye-opening experience is a surprising experience. It surprises us so much that our eyes get big. It was an eye-opening experience to see an actual robbery take place. When we're in high spirits, we're feeling really happy. When I passed the exam, I felt in high spirits. I hope you'll get to know this feeling. Bump into means to meet. I usually bump into my old friends once a month at Starbucks. Once in a blue moon. Use this for something that seldom or rarely happens. You only get an opportunity this good once in a blue moon. Can't stand means you cannot tolerate something. I really can't stand noisy places. I avoid them whenever I can. Have a chin wag means to have a chat. It's a bit like your chin is wagging because you're talking. Every Friday, I like to meet my mates at Starbucks for a chin wag. Helping hand is a way to say that you help. My sister was moving to a new home, so I decided to give a helping hand. The wee hours means early in the morning. Wee means small, and in this case, the wee hours are the early hours of the morning. My assignment was due at 9 a.m. the next day, so I had to work until the wee hours. Basically means staying up late studying. Make a fuss over. To overly care, or to care too much. Don't make a fuss over this. It is really quite trivial. Trivial means not so important, small. An early bird is a person who likes to get up early. My sister is an early bird. She gets up at 6:30 a.m. every morning to go jogging. So what if you get to part 3 of your test? So you've just finished part 2 and then you think, gosh, I don't think I've used any idiomatic expressions. Maybe the examiner is going to give me 6 for vocabulary. This is the very point too where the examiner might be thinking about idiomatic expressions. At the end of your part 2, the examiner gets to listen to you for 2 minutes, ideally. They're not having to ask you questions. They're able to sit back and analyze your language. They may have noticed no idiomatic expressions, and this might be on their mind. So the start of part 3 is the ideal time to show some idiomatic expressions. And let's look at a few that are particularly useful in part 3 and at the start of part 3. And I suggest that you use one of these at the beginning of your part 3. And if you're practicing, if you're preparing for your test, practice this over and over again to use one of these idiomatic expressions to answer the first question. And why not use the other one for the second question? So let's have a look at a couple of idiomatic expressions. Actually, I've got a few for you. I've got about 5 here for you. Okay, so first of all, off the top of my head. So off the top of my head means without giving it too much thought. So you should be able to start your part 3 with this phrase. So the examiner asks you something like, what are the different types of places where people can go shopping in your country? And you start your answer with, off the top of my head. And then you could say something like, off the top of my head, department stores are the most popular. All right, another phrase that you can use, and you can use in part 3. Other parts too, these are not limited to part 3, but they can be used for every part 3 test that you take, which means if you prepare for your test, you've got no excuse to not be using idiomatic expressions. Here's another one. The first thing that springs to mind is... So that's just the first thing I can think of. The first thing that springs to mind is department stores. Let's see some more idiomatic expressions. The first thing that pops into my head. Just the first thing I can think of, just like the previous one. The first thing that pops into my head is department stores. And then here's another couple of slightly different idiomatic expressions you can use. I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Now, you can use this phrase when you didn't hear a question or you didn't understand a question. You could also use it strategically when you do understand a question, but you just want to show an idiomatic expression or just buy a bit of time to think. So you could be thinking while you say this, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. So I didn't quite catch that. I didn't quite hear or understand what you're saying. Gosh, that's a tricky question. This one, you're asking me a difficult question. You can use this question again strategically when you don't find the question tricky or difficult, or when you actually do find it difficult and again you want to buy yourself a little bit of time to think, or you find the question difficult and you start with this phrase because it's a great phrase and it comes out fluently and it's got an idiomatic expression in it, and then maybe just give a very short answer like, gosh, that's a tricky question for me because I'm not really into shopping. I just stay home a lot. I think it could be online shopping these days. Okay, so you could just give a fairly short answer if you find it is really a difficult question. You're going to be prepared for almost any topic that you come across. You're going to have plenty to talk about. You're going to have lots of high-level language to increase your score for vocabulary.